You've all been so clever for so long. You've forgotten to be humble. You've tortured us all with surprise endings that made no sense. You've introduced characters in the last 5 pages that were never in the book before. You've withheld clues and information that made it impossible for us to guess who did it. But now, the tables are turned. It's checkout time, ladies and gentlemen.
Alright, Mother Hubbards, let's break down this bar steward. What? We're going to start and end with one of Glass Onion's biggest issues. It informs a lot of the problems with the film, plus it will need to be referenced a lot for the rest of the video. One of the cardinal sins of murder mysteries can be summed up in one word: obfuscation. The fun of a murder mystery is following along with the protagonist as they snoop around, finding clues as to the identity of the murderer, and, if you can, working out their identity yourself before it's revealed in the story. Leaving out important information or twisting it out of focus in an unnatural way makes for a surprise ending for sure, but also ruins the point of a murder mystery. Glass Onion does exactly that. For the first half of the film, in what I'm going to refer to as Story 1, you think you're following Private Detective Benoit Blanc on yet another mysterious, anonymous invitation to a murder. Then the film comes to an abrupt halt, restarts, and tells the same story again in what I'm going to call Story 2. But now there's a new character with new information that recontextualizes everything. Even pre-existing scenes are changed to suit this new narrative. This also has the effect of separating out information that would otherwise sew together to make certain things more obvious. With that in mind, this video is going to tackle the story of Glass Onion as it should have been, with everything together in its chronological order.
Let's do this. Leroy Dragons!
The film starts by introducing us to Claire, Lionel, Birdie with her assistant Peg, and Duke with his girlfriend Whiskey. They are a politician, scientist, model, and internet personality respectively. And if these professions were important to the plot, then perhaps I'd give them more attention. Unfortunately, their professions are so ineffectual they could all be homeschooled tea dolly assemblers and still have the same impact on the story. The most you can say about their professions is that they are an attempt, albeit a bad attempt, by the writer-director to include some sort of social political commentary in his film. This lot all receive puzzle boxes which they collectively solve in a group chat, showing the audience they are friends with one another. The boxes reveal invitations to a murder mystery weekend with their friend Miles Brong.
My dear friends, my beautiful disruptors, my closest inner circle.
We could all use a moment of normalcy, and so you are cordially invited
for a long weekend on my private island,
where we will celebrate the bonds that connect us, and I hope your puzzle-solving skills are whetted.
You will also be competing to solve the mystery
of my murder. Travel details to come. Please forward any dietary restrictions. Love and all my kisses, Miles.
We are then shown this woman who also has a box who was not included in the group chat. She opens her box in her own special way. Finally, our protagonist is introduced, sitting in his bath, failing to understand Among Us, with a bunch of famous faces. His housemate, boyfriend, butler, the other person in the flat, played rather randomly by Hugh Grant, announces,
"There's someone here for you, with a box."
In Story 1, before the film resets itself, This is where this scene ends, but we're not going anywhere. In story 2, we see the person at the door is Helen Brand, twin sister of the famous Cassandra Andy Brand, the former co-owner of Alpha Industries, a massive, wealthy tech company. Helen informs Blanc that Andy died. Suicide, according to the police.
2 days ago, I received a call. My twin sister committed suicide. In her car, in her garage, with the engine running.
But Helen thinks it wasn't suicide. Andy had sent an email to the disruptors the day before she was found dead. In that email was a picture of an envelope, one that Helen couldn't find in Andy's house. I know what you're thinking. Why hasn't Andy taken this to the police?
Somebody like me takes something like this about a group of rich folk with an army full of lawyers.
What if one was to get him alone?
Oh, she's cut off. This is the sort of line that initially perfectly explains things, but given some thought, really doesn't. The police would absolutely investigate this, lawyers or no lawyers, along with other things that get brought up later. Instead of going to the police, Helen brought this mystery, along with the puzzle box and the invitation, to Blanc, who is more than happy to help. Andy also kept diaries all her life, so Helen was able to find out basically everything she needed to know leading up to her sister's death. Then it turns out no one knows Andy is dead yet, so Blanc comes up with a plan. Dress Helen up like Andy and send her on the murder mystery weekend in her sister's place, with Blanc in tow.
I'm proposing that you come with me as your sister. A famous detective shows up and out of the blue starts poking the subject to your sister. They'll shut up like a clam. Your presence on that island is the essential catalyst.
There's one more exchange here that has some relevance for later, and delivers an undeserved gut punch to the audience.
Is this safe?
From the moment you arrive on that island, the killer will know who you are and what you are doing. And they certainly wouldn't hesitate to kill again if it covers their tracks.
We will definitely be coming back to this. So what are the problems here? There's plenty we can't go into yet, like the box, the suicide details, and the danger line, but we can certainly point out how ungodly fortunate a lot of this is. It's convenient that no one knows about Andy Brand's death yet. It's also convenient that her sister is her twin. It's also convenient that Andy Brand kept diaries all her life. All of this allows Blanc to come up with the plan for Helen to pretend to be Andy. Change one of these aspects and the deception couldn't take place. This is highly unlikely, but as long as this is the only instance of this sort of convenience taking place, I can't complain too much about it. It's also fortunate that the police investigation was so badly botched. Andy Brand, a very famous face and formerly one of the richest people in the world, dies prematurely. Jumping ahead a little, Andy Brand lost a court case to her business partner Miles Bron not 2 months prior. Yep, the same Miles Bron who invited the Disruptors and Andy to a murder mystery weekend. This court case was big news, and one of the people involved in that court case being found dead shortly after should sound alarm bells. But the police label it a suicide and leave it at that. Which is insane! They don't check her computer, or, as it turns out later, her phone either. The cherry on the top of this turd cake is Helen not taking the email to the police because lawyers. A massive lampshade if ever there was one. Between the police incompetency and Helen withholding information from them, the plot is allowed to happen. Before the film has even got going, it's shot itself in the foot with this bollocks, and it's limping along for the rest of the runtime. Bloody hell, film! Blanc and Helen meet up in Greece. They discuss possible motives for the Disruptors and Miles, and go over their plan of deception. Helen then recants Andy's notes, which make for interesting reading, and the scene ends with,
I'm scared.
This is your last chance to back out.
the fact we see her in the rest of the film means she didn't, which tells us how determined she is to find the murderer, as well as informs us of the strength of her character. All of which we don't get to see until much, much later in the film, because this all happens in story 2. See what I mean about obfuscation? And once again, lots of little details don't sit right and end up painting a very different picture to the one we're supposed to see. And despite a big info dump, there's still things we don't know. Let's look at Andy's notes for a bit. Andy befriended the Disruptors 10 years prior to the events of the film, which is odd, since it doesn't sound like she liked any of them.
All of them run aground in their 30s. Claire just lost a race for city council. Lionel was a substitute teacher. Bertie was a washed-up model. Duke was a nerd doing video game tournaments.
Andy introduced the Disruptors to Miles, who got them all started on their journeys to success. And after Andy writes a bunch of stuff on a napkin, she works with Miles to make Alpha Industries. 8 years later, Andy leaves the company in protest over Miles wanting to invest in a new superfuel. In response, Miles cuts Andy out of her ownership of Alpha, so Andy sues, using her napkin as evidence of intellectual ownership. Except Andy can't find her napkin, and in court, the Disruptors say Miles wrote the napkin, making Alpha look like his idea. They are loyal to the man who gave them their successes, rather than the woman who thought they were washed-up, run-aground losers. Funny that. Just before the events of Glass Onion, Andy finds her napkin, puts it in an envelope and emails the Disruptors a warning. That is the email Helen found, and the envelope she couldn't, leading us back to where we were. This scene informs us on the backstory of Andy, Miles Bron, the Disruptors, and what sort of relationships they're all in. And once again, we don't find out any of this until story 2. So what are we missing? We don't know what Andy and Miles did prior to starting Alpha Industries. Considering how much time is spent on the Disruptors' jobs, it's odd Miles and Andy's don't get mentioned. Granted, the Disruptors' occupations seem to be in the film purely so someone can splurge their terrible, small-minded social commentary onto the screen. But you would have thought Miles and Andy's jobs significant, considering Andy gets this otherwise unrelated group of people together and Miles somehow gets them all what they wanted. Their old jobs might also have influence on who had the most clout behind the founding of Alpha. Speaking of, what is Alpha Industries? Andy and Miles fight over it in the court case, and yet it's never clear exactly what it is. The napkin notes make it look like a cyber security company? ? If so, then, according to Andy herself, Miles made Alpha into the successful, widespread tech company it eventually became.
Let's just roll with it. Let's humor them. Let's see where it goes. So based on the napkin idea, Andy and Miles created Alpha. Miles's aspirations keep getting bigger and bigger.
Knowing their old professions and what exactly Alpha does might also have informed us why Andy didn't want to invest in a new and apparently amazing experimental fuel when Miles did.
It's a new solid hydrogen fuel. It's incredibly powerful. It's radically efficient. 0 carbon emissions, and it's derived from abundant seawater.
No. Oh, no. This is not a startup. This could blow up the world.
There's a potential story here where Miles has the crazy concepts and Andy realizes them and makes them feasible. But that's not what we're shown and told. We're supposed to side with Andy, to see her as the leader, the ideas woman, the true face of success. But between the Disruptors and Alpha, Miles comes out looking like a visionary realizer, while Andy had a napkin. Beyond job descriptions, or lack thereof, there's the issue of the court case.
I'll walk, and I'll take half the company to stop you from using it for this. Then she found out that Miles had the lawyers work the contract, so she was cut out the company completely.
This is either referring to some original contract Miles and Andy signed when they founded Alpha, or the one on Andy's desk regarding the fuel, or another unseen contract regarding her leaving the company. Regardless which it is, the idea of Andy signing a contract that would remove her rights to her own company makes her sound like an idiot. Which, honestly, coincides with the fact she thought she didn't keep the foundational notes she built said company around. Funnily enough, Blanc says this,
Miles Braun is not an idiot.
which is meant to connect up with this,
I'm very bad at dumb things. My Achilles heel.
and later, this.
Miles Braun is an idiot.
But based on Andy's notes, Miles is looking pretty good so far. Come the morning, we arrive at a dock in Greece, where Blanc, the Disruptors, and Helen arrive to board a private boat to Miles Braun's private island. There's a good bit of characterization here that is wasted in this film. The story of Glass Onion is set during the pandemic. Blanc has a proper mask and is wearing it correctly. Same goes for Lionel the scientist and Birdie's assistant Peg. Claire the politician has a proper mask but isn't wearing it right. Birdie's mask is just a thin, open mesh, which I didn't even notice she was wearing the first time I watched this film. And Duke and his girlfriend Whiskey aren't wearing masks at all and are actively running up to hug people. This is the best the writing gets in this film. It characterizes each person without needing to explain anything. Unfortunately, just like their professions, the characters of these characters don't have much in the way of effect on the plot, so all this is somewhat wasted. A shame, but there we are. Back to the story, everyone thinks it odd to see Blanc there.
Tight with Miles?
No, never met.
Oh, I get it. The murder mystery thing. Benoit Blanc is gonna help solve the mystery of Miles's murder.
Then this bloke turns up and starts spraying people in the mouth.
No pineapple on that, right? Duke don't dance with pineapple.
There's no pineapple.
What is that?
Open, please.
Oh, you're not going to explain what this is?
You won't be needing that anymore.
I won't.
You're good.
And it cures COVID?
Is that some kind of disinfectant? Oh.
You're good.
Wow, they're really not explaining it, are they? Helen turns up last, disguised as Andy, and the Disruptors are shocked. All of them. In Story 1, this is the first time the audience sees Helen, and they will be told it's her sister Andy. Helen does not exist yet. The Disruptors' reaction is meant to make you ponder what sort of relationship these people have with one another. But following Story 2, it would instead make you wonder which of these people is shocked to see her alive, rather than being shocked to see her turning up at all.
The question isn't why did you invite her? It's why did she show up?
Ballsy move.
You shouldn't be here.
There are crumbs of a well-written, rewatchable story in this film. But, as we'll soon see, there's a reason the film split into Story 1 and Story 2. A couple of things first, though. Duke turns up on his motorbike, and it's visible in back of shot. A cut later, and it's gone. How the bloody hell did they get rid of that without us hearing it leave? But this film doesn't think about little details like that. Also, just like the random appearances of Hugh Grant and all those famous faces from earlier, we get Ethan Hawke playing the spray gun guy. This film really likes its random celebs, and this isn't the last one that will turn up either. The last detail to mention here is Helen's mask, or lack of one. Given the attention the other characters' masks got, I hope this was deliberate and in line with the thematics. But then again, given how often this film gets little bits and pieces wrong, I can also imagine this was a cock-up. Kind of like this. The boat arrives at the island and we get some exorbitant displays of wealth. A glass dock rises out of the water with what Lionel describes as Banksy statues flanking it. Miles Bron playing Paul McCartney's guitar. A giant glass onion sitting atop a building which turns out to be an office. A robot collecting their bags. Wristbands with haptic controls for the hotel rooms. And a booming voice sounding the top of the hour that in universe was composed by the musician Philip Glass, and in the meta is voiced by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. The whole point of this is to get across just how stupidly wealthy Miles Bron is, and how willing he is to throw his money around. I think it works. Miles greets everyone with a hug, pays no attention to Peg, pays a lot of attention to Whiskey, is confused by Blanc, and shocked by not Andy. He then tells everyone about their rooms.
Your biorhythm monitor is the key to your room. It'll lead you to the room using haptics. Your rooms are assigned by the chakra that I most closely associate with each of you.
I mention this now because it never gets mentioned again. Ever. I also mention this now because something happens later that makes me wonder, why the bloody hell are these even a thing? I also want to point out this very, very weird bit of editing. Behind the group on the beach, there are deck chairs and Paul McCartney's guitar. Then when they leave, all that's gone, and suddenly there's bags there. What? When? How? Bloody hell, film. In story 1, Blanc and not Andy meet for the first time. In story 2, they pretend to meet each other for the first time. Then Blanc tells Helen to snoop around whilst he's chatting to Miles. Once everyone has gone to their rooms, Miles does indeed want to chat with Blanc, and Helen goes for a snoop, leading to a chat with Whiskey, who turns out to be more than she seems.
I think it's really shitty what they all did to you. I read your court transcripts and you got shanked.
Why do you put up with this?
With Duke, I'm building my brand. And he's putting me on his channel more often. So he's leaning harder right into this fandom stuff. Like if I'm gonna go into politics eventually, it's expeditious, but it's kind of a shit show.
A kind-hearted, intelligent, brand-focused, aspiring politician who's treated as nothing but arm candy by the idiots around her. I could almost give this film credit for delivering so much of Whiskey's character to the audience in such a short space of time. Except that it walks the line between dialogue and verbatim reading a character description, and none of it ever comes up again. It's almost like someone was trying to subvert our opinions about the internet thought. Tell a lie, there is one thing that gets brought up later.
That's a beautiful necklace. You a Taurus?
Yeah, Miles got it for me. He, surprised me for my birthday. He filled his entire penthouse apartment with roses. It was very cute.
Don't worry about it too much though. Meanwhile, Miles wants to know what Blanc is doing on his island. Because of story 2, we know Helen told Blanc about the box and the party. But Miles doesn't know that, and Blanc doesn't want him to. They come to the conclusion that, as a joke, one of the disruptors reset their box and sent it to Blanc so as to bring an actual detective to the murder mystery weekend. Miles is happy with this. I'm bloody not. In terms of plot, if Miles was curious in any way, shape or form, he might ask everyone to show their invitations. He'd then find out not Andy didn't have hers, and Miles would ask why she invited Blanc. That would cause issues. There's also a question of why Miles sent Andy a box at all. He mentions,
My puzzle guy barely got the 5 done in time and he apprenticed with Ricky J.
It sounds like the boxes took a long time to R&D and build, so that would cover the week or so between Andy dying and this point in the story. It may even cover the 2 months between the end of the court case and now. But, according to Andy's notes, she fell out with Miles 2 years ago. Miles definitely shouldn't be sending Andy a puzzle box invitation, especially since she didn't turn up last year.
Yeah, this is my second one of these things. We did a yacht thing last year.
Out of universe, this is all a massive, disappointing subversion. In story 1, Blanc tells Miles,
Mr. Braun, I've learned through bitter experience an anonymous invitation is not to be trifled with.
This references Knives Out, the film prior to Glass Onion, in which Blanc was invited to investigate a murder by persons unknown. It turned out the murderer had invited Blanc to help frame someone else, and it had nearly worked. Now it appears the same thing is happening again, and, thanks to this line, we the audience would be treating this scene a bit more seriously. Except that turns out to be a load of rubbish in story 2. The film kicked the legs out from under what would otherwise have been a resoundingly important line. But wait, it gets worse. Remember this line from earlier?
There's someone here for you. With a box.
We know it's Helen with her smashed box. Question: why did she bring the box with her? She could have brought the invitation on its own and told Blanc about the box without having to lug it all the way to his place. The simple fact of the matter is, it's another subversion. In story 1, the someone with a box line is all the audience gets before cutting to the dock scene. Blanc even mentions in story 1,
Wooden box was delivered to my home with some children's puzzles, which, once I completed them, there was an invitation inside.
This gives the impression the box was intact, and Blanc completed the puzzles himself. Both lines together instill the idea it definitely wasn't Helen's box, but one of the disruptors. All of which is completely thrown out when we know Helen brought her smashed box to Blanc in story 2, for no good reason other than for Blanc's mate to yell out,
There's someone here for you. With a box.
So as to confuse the audience in story 1, subvert their expectations in story 2, and generally obfuscate information. Well, ain't that a load of bollocks? Hang on, if Miles didn't know Blanc was coming, then how comes Ethan Hawke had a wristband for him? Miles said,
Your rooms are assigned. Your biorhythm monitor is the key to your room. It'll lead you to the room using haptics.
So why is there a wristband for Blanc? See what I mean about little details? Anyway, we find everyone is lazing around the pool. Combining story 1 and 2, we learn 5 things.
You remember that night you almost pancaked me with it on the road outside? Right?
Anderson Cooper's birthday.
That is quite a piece.
Never without it.
You signed off on the power plant.
Yep.
I signed off on putting Clear in a manned mission. The staff doesn't know it yet.
There was a time, back when I was the one on magazines. He was nobody. He was this little thing in my hand. I preferred that.
Of these, Claire and Lionel's conversation is left until story 2, because Blanc couldn't hear them from where he was, and he's so bad at snooping they could tell he was trying to listen to them. This is an example of information that didn't need to be left until later, but it was for the sake of an unrelated subversion. We also get this from Peg.
When he goes to his room, just follow him and then just do it.
I will take care of him.
The lack of context and the random knife gestures makes this appear threatening. When you find out what Peg is referring to, the lines make more sense, but the knife still doesn't. My guess? This is a really badly implemented red herring. We also, once again, get some really bad editing. After Helen walks to the pool with Whiskey, she walks off.
Really?
For context, after Whiskey walks with Helen to the pool, Birdie arrives to see Whiskey swimming. Blanc arrives and walks over to Miles at about the same time as Whiskey. Duke makes the pancake comment. Then he gets out of the pool and fires his gun.
Really?
All of this happens between the seemingly contiguous shots of Helen turning away from the pool and walking down the path. From the way she looks up, she also appears to have teleported in the opposite direction and down the hill. Seriously, what is this editing? Bloody hell, film. In story 2, we cut to Blanc and Helen discussing what she heard regards Claire and Lionel.
Interesting stuff about Whiskey and motives for both Lionel and Claire. They bet the farm and will both be ruined, along with Miles if he fails. They need to protect him at all costs.
We need to find opportunities. It's time to push.
We're not pushing anything right now.
Helen ends up being right, because Blanc isn't very good at this whole detective thing. Blanc joins Miles, Birdie, and Peg.
Is that a fax machine?
Miles doesn't even have a phone.
I have one number. Goes to all my fax machines all over the world.
That's two very, very important bits of information that have just been given, and so casually you'd be forgiven for not remembering. For now, I'll say the idea of Miles, the owner of a massive tech company, not owning a mobile phone and only using a fax machine, is insane. Even more so, the idea he has many fax machines around the world and everything gets faxed to all of them at once. Does that include sensitive documents? Surely that's a security risk. Like I said, this is important information for later, and that's all it is. World building and believability be damned. Blanc asks,
What first drew you all together?
Disruptors recognize each other.
Blanc asks what a disruptor is, and Miles gives a long speech which amounts to people that change things.
If you want to shake things up, you start with something small. Everybody gets excited because you're busting up something that everyone wanted broken in the first place. Are you willing to break the thing that nobody wants you to break? They're going to tell you to stop. Even your partner will say, you need to stop.
A quick Google tells us that disruption theory is all about invigorating a stagnant marketplace with fresh innovations. The way Miles describes it, you'd think he was talking about a revolution, but in reality it's just another marketing ploy. Miles describes how each of the disruptors disrupted things by doing their jobs, which is in keeping with the established theory. Only Birdie actually disrupted things, and that was by being incredibly stupid, which is her only character trait in this film. I'm not joking. Then Not Andy chimes in, proclaiming everyone's reliance on Miles.
Every single one of you is holding on for dear life to Miles Brine's golden titties.
And finishing off with,
You'll stab a friend in the back to hold on.
beyond the disruptor speech, which has thematic relevance, so I'm going to ignore that for now, there are two really odd things about this scene. Thanks to my sewing stories 1 and 2 together, we know what Helen means by friends stabbing each other in the back. It hits home and hits hard because everyone there did just that in the court case. But in story 1, where Not Andy's rant takes place, the audience don't know this, so they are left in the dark as to what she's referring to. By the time the court information is revealed, the audience may have forgotten about this rant. Or, more likely, will be too confused and or annoyed by the reset to connect the dots. Same goes for how the disruptors got together. In Miles' opinion, they recognised each other for what they were, but in her notes, Andy said she brought them together. Again, there's a huge chasm between these two plot points thanks to the story reset, so once again, the significance of the line is hamstrung by filmmaking bullshittery. The film is literally crippling itself for the sake of a subversion. How the disruptors got together is also deliberately pushed aside, obfuscated if thou willst. Whether going by Miles or Andy's explanation, neither truly explains how such different people got together.
Disruptors recognize each other.
They used to hang together at this bar. They were all friends with Andy. Andy saw their potential. She found them all.
The film clearly doesn't want the audience to know how the disruptors got together, but at the same time, it keeps hinting at it. If the film truly doesn't think the circumstances important or relevant, why does it keep hinting at it? Just say they all met at the same bar. Done. Dusted. Move on. Bloody hell, film. Two events follow Helen's rant. Story 1 follows Blanc as he spies on Peg confronting Miles.
Please don't do this. Bird showed me the statement that you want her to make to the press about Bangladesh. Make her go through with it. Her name is destroyed.
She doesn't want Birdie to make a statement because it will hurt Birdie and Peg. But Miles does, and he has the final say. That was worth it to show a bronze ass. Meanwhile, in story 2, Claire confronts not Andy, closely followed by Duke. This is possibly the most important scene in the film regards Andy's murder. Not Andy confronts Claire and Duke about the email and why they didn't email back.
About the email? You didn't even write back!
I'm a politician. I never email anything that I wouldn't want to see on the front page of the Times. That's why I called. We all did.
And when we couldn't reach you, I went to your house.
We knocked and waited and called for you, and after an hour we left.
The scene closes out with this nice, emotionally impactful confrontation by not Andy.
If I would have answered the door that night, would you have said, I'm sorry? Or were you just showing up so you could stop me from using that envelope?
This is how the earlier rant scene might have felt if the film had played everything in order. At least we got a taste of it here. Unfortunately, any emotional weight these lines give is obliterated as the information provided by Claire blows a hole in the side of the good ship Glass Onion. This is where we find out the police, nor Helen apparently, checked Andy's phone. Otherwise they would have seen the plethora of calls the disruptors had made. That alone would have put their guilt into question and given the police reason to investigate. But the police have to be traumatically incompetent to allow the film to happen the way it does. But that's the least destructive cannonball unloaded here. Remember what Helen said about Andy's suicide?
My twin sister committed suicide. In her car, in her garage, the engine running.
Being as spoiler-free as possible, by the time the disruptors arrive at Andy's house, Andy is either dead or dying. She is in her garage, in her car, with the engine running. And it's not like they popped round for a few seconds and buggered off.
We knocked and waited and called for you, and after an hour we left.
Worst case scenario. Everyone arrives and makes lots of noise trying to get Andy's attention inside the house. Eventually, they all calm down and wait around outside. In the quiet, they hear the car engine, or they see the exhaust gases building up in the garage. They break in, only to find Andy has succumbed to the fumes. Best case scenario, they arrive, hear the car engine running right away, and break in, saving Andy's life. Either way, police and ambulances would be called, and the film would have ended up very, very differently. Alas, the entire lot of them suffered from collective deafness and blindness. One more little detail before we move on.
He almost got in an accident on his motorcycle. He was driving so fast.
Andy, I almost got pancaked.
This scene takes place in story 2, much later than the first time Duke talks about being pancaked in story 1.
You remember that night you almost pancaked me with it on the road outside? Right?
Anderson Cooper's birthday.
Because of this, the connection between these two statements isn't as strong as it could be. But, viewing both stories in tandem, the statements are closer together and hint at something which the film, or more accurately the writer, doesn't want you to notice yet. Like I said, the writing in this film ain't great. As if the fact all of the disruptors turning up at Andy's place the night she died wasn't enough of a bombshell, Glass Onion throws another in right afterwards. In Story 2, Blanc and Helen discuss the possibility of one of the disruptors somehow killing Andy, coming to the conclusion that any of them could have.
Duke came early, and Bertie came late. Lionel and Claire were never there long.
They could have gotten there early, killed your sister, circled away, and then waited for the other to arrive.
All of this is done in front of Serena Williams, by the way, who is just hanging out on the wall. You'd think she'd mention this conversation to someone. Anyway, Blanc hears a fax machine going and, well...
One number, all his machines.
They are then interrupted by Duke, who is trying to convince Whiskey to persuade Miles to... Actually, let's take this slowly because bloody hell. In a short amount of time, Story 2 has told us all the disruptors turned up at Andy's place and didn't see her, meaning they might not have killed her. Simultaneously, Blanc and Helen conclude any of them could have killed Andy in this scenario by turning up early or late. Then Blanc finds the email has been faxed to Miles, who, up until this point, thanks to his one and only form of communication being the fax machine, was not included as a suspect. So now he is. Add to this Duke's pancake comments.
You remember that night you almost pancaked me with it on the road outside, right?
Anderson Cooper's birthday.
He almost got in an accident on his motorcycle. He was driving so fast.
Andy, I almost got pancaked.
At this point in the film, Blanc knows what we know. Technically, so does the audience watching the film, but everything else is so chopped up between stories 1 and 2, it wouldn't be a surprise if connections weren't made. Blanc would have both the pancaking comments and the faxed email and the information about the house visits. I don't know about you, but I'd be suspecting someone else other than the disruptors at this point. But as we'll soon see, Blanc, the world's greatest detective, hasn't cottoned on yet. And it's about to get so much worse. The editing has already been a bit dodgy in this film, but it's about to get deliberately so for the sake of the plot and, you guessed it, subversion. Or lies. Let's be honest, it's just lies at this point. Blanc and Helen are standing next to the fax machine when Duke walks in.
It doesn't necessarily mean he can get out. Right now.
Where the bloody hell are they going? This is what this area looks like. Where did they go? This isn't Skyrim, you can't just disappear by squatting. This is just silly. What comes next is not. In Story 1, Blanc sees Duke run past, then walks on a path for a bit before we cut back to Duke stopping to peek on Miles and Whiskey. The editing makes it look like this all happened in real time. In Story 2, Duke runs past Blanc. Blanc meets up with Helen. They chat. They find the fax. Duke walks in on his phone. Then we cut to Duke having a peek. Talk about rewriting history. But wait, it gets worse. In Story 1, Duke is the only one in shot watching Miles and Whiskey. But then... In Story 2, Blanc and Helen are in shot behind Duke. And then...
The YouTube channel's dying. He needs the exposure.
History is once again rewritten. But it gets worse. In Story 1, we don't get the scene where Duke asks Whiskey to do anything. We just see him seeing her with Miles, and, supposedly, his reaction to seeing them together. In Story 2, not only do we get the phone scene, but we also hear more of what Whiskey and Miles are saying, and we see Duke's reaction again, this time to what he's actually reacting to.
The YouTube channel's dying. He needs the exposure. Just put him on Alpha News.
He is my loyal friend, but I can't put him on Alpha News, okay? I can't have Rhino Horn Boner Pill Karma in the mix.
Having additional information in Story 2 is bad. Adding new scenes to change timings and positions is also bad. Re-editing shots to change their contexts is worse. Obfuscating information and adding it back in later is bollocks. We're not even at the end and this film has already drowned in its own bullshit. Bloody hell, film. The film gets a bit more sensible as Blanc and Helen listen in on the conversation between Peg and Birdie. It essentially clarifies what Peg was talking to Miles about.
What is this?
An email from the Sweetie Pants contractor 2 years ago.
Please tell me you did not think sweatshops are where they make sweatpants.
I am going to sign the statement. He said if I take full responsibility for the sweatshops, he'll pay me the value of my shares.
Did I mention that Birdie's only character trait was that she was stupid? Then Blanc and Helen talk and decide they need to find the envelope.
Whoever killed your sister took that envelope to protect Miles. They wouldn't just destroy it. They would want him to see what they'd done for him.
The plan is for Helen to get into a fight, lose, and storm off, giving her time to search people's rooms. And so we come to the night of the murder mystery. Miles has made everyone their favourite drinks. This will be important later. Claire asks about the print of the Mona Lisa, only for Miles to reveal it's the real painting on loan.
It all started with her. The first night that we hung out in the Glass Onion, what did I say? You know, I wanna be responsible for something that gets talked about in the same breath as the Mona Lisa, forever.
Miles then reveals he's going to unveil Clear to the world, and that it's powering his whole island. Clear, the super fuel that made Andy leave Alpha, and what Claire and Lionel are invested in. This scene is meant to show that, unchained by Andy's management, Miles is making big, risky decisions. But at the same time, it's showing his big risks pay off, unless something goes badly wrong. More on that later. Everyone sits down for dinner, and Miles announces the murder mystery is about to begin, only for Blanc to solve it before it even happens.
It was Birdie who planted a remote device on a crossbow in revenge for you stealing her signature Ren diamond.
The murder mystery has its problems, but they pale in comparison to the question of why did Miles allow Blanc to take part? It would be like arranging a friendly tennis tournament with your friends, only to allow Serena Williams to play as well. But the murder mystery, despite being the reason for everyone being here, is a small and insignificant part of this story. Blanc reveals to Miles, in private, that he spoiled the murder mystery because he's worried about a real murder, that of Miles Bron himself. Blanc reveals he knows everything about Miles' dealings with the Disruptors, and tells Miles they are motives for them to kill him.
You've taken 7 people, each of whom has a real-life reason to wish you harm, gathered them together on a remote island, and placed the idea of your murder in their heads.
So you play hardball with Lionel, threaten to destroy his reputation if he does not play along and power man rocket with Clear. But no, with Clear too. Now perhaps
you threaten to support her opponent in the up-and-coming election if she does not approve your power plant. And Birdie, Bangladesh. Sweetie Pants are manufactured there in a sweatshop. You're making Birdie take the fall to cover your ass as the main investor. Duke? Well, we all know why Duke wants to kill you.
He doesn't know about that.
Yes, he does.
Knowing as much as Blanc does at this point, we know he's twisting the truth, because he considers the information he's garnered to be reasons to protect Miles, not kill him. I would give the film credit for this little twist, except I can't think of a reason why Blanc would do it. In fact, as we soon see, ruining the murder mystery makes everyone want to leave the island right away, taking any opportunity to discover Andy's murderer along with them.
Well, I'm out of here. Tomorrow morning, gone.
Well, I hate saying this in any context, but I'm with Duke.
We should probably go too.
I don't think that's what you want to happen, Blonky boy. Also, this conversation takes place in Story 1. The audience doesn't know what Blanc is talking about. This information would appear to come out of bloody nowhere, and even the part about Duke knowing what Miles did would be an incorrect interpretation based on a re-edited scene. I'm not sure if this is meant to make Blanc look smarter than the audience thinks he is, if this is meant to make people who remember what he said have an aha moment later during Story 2, or for people who re-watch the film to hear this and have a different aha moment. Whatever the reason, all I get is annoyed. Annoyed for Blanc having information I don't at this point in the film. Annoyed when I find out later how he knows all this. Annoyed because it's presented like a clever move, but has an incredibly negative effect. Bloody hell, film. Blanc then notices a napkin Miles has framed behind his desk, a forgery that is shown during the reading of Andy's notes, something Blanc would know at this point.
Right after the verdict, Miles suddenly found the napkin written in his handwriting and did all those interviews about it.
I sketched out the original idea for Alpha on a cocktail napkin and I showed it to Andy one night. Liar!
This small section of the film is both well made and horribly made, depending on how you look at it.
Andy.
Miles, sounding sorrowful, is meant to show how sad he is that things aren't like they used to be. In retrospect, this time properly, this may also mean something else, but we'll have to leave that till later. I'm also wondering if the lighting dynamic here is meant to represent good and evil, right and wrong, another subtle hint as to what's to come. The problem is I don't want to give this film the benefit of the doubt, given what we've already seen. I do like the humanization of Miles as he whines sorrowfully about the past and the present.
Andy used to tell me the truth. Nobody does that now. It's all just fake smiles and agendas and people wanting what they think they're owed, hating you when you don't give it to them because that's what you're there for.
It gives an otherwise cartoonishly, ridiculously rich guy character a bit of depth and relatability. Dewdrops in the desert and all that. The next scene I honestly think was meant to be in Story 2. It appears to take place at the same time as the Miles Blanc conversation and focuses on what happens with Helen, which is something the film doesn't do until Story 2. The Disruptors discuss whether they want to stay on the island for the weekend or not, and Helen takes the opportunity to cause an argument.
Miserable in paradise. We've all earned this.
Yes, you have.
There's a line here which, given Story 2 context, jumps out at me.
You made money off of Alpha all those years. You did fine. You got yours.
The Disruptors know Andy got everything taken from her in the court case, so this line doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, in the context of Story 1, I imagine a lot of these lines are supposed to make the audience wonder who wants to kill Miles.
What'd you come for, Andy? And given the circumstances, I think it's a fair question.
We all stuck with Miles. What do you want?
What Claire's trying to say is we're sorry. We feel bad for you. What do you want?
You want revenge? You want to slit Miles' throat?
We are all holding on to that golden tip. We're all playing the same game here, honey. The loser. There. That's the truth.
As for the rest of the conversation, it really feels like a scene made for a rewatch, with the context that Andy is dead.
You did fine. You got yours.
I got it. My life was taken away from me by everyone in this room. My life!
Go ahead and put yourself up on a cross like some unspeakable crime has been committed against you that none of us could possibly imagine. I'm tired of pretending like you're the victim in this game.
In another, better written film, these lines might work. but without the context of story 2, they are basically meaningless. Just like Helen's rant earlier, everyone is talking about the court case, something the audience wouldn't know about yet in story 1. Then again, there's no subtext in the conversation about one of the disruptors being Andy's murderer. Neither they nor the audience know Andy's dead yet. Based on a later scene, the disruptors may not even know Helen is a thing. The audience definitely don't. Simply put, this scene feels very out of place, not addressing things it should, and addressing things it shouldn't. Regardless, in story 1, Andy storms off, putting her under possible suspicion for soon-to-happen events. In story 2, Helen storms off as planned.
He's a son of a bitch, Whiskey. Leave his ass.
Then she runs off to search everybody's rooms for the envelope. And if you're wondering how Helen is going to search the rooms when everyone needed wristbands to unlock them, wristbands? What wristbands? I don't know what you're talking about. The film certainly doesn't. Which leads us to the murder scene. The murder and the reveal take place surprisingly close together, at least chronologically. So I'm going to describe the murder, then talk about it when the details are revealed.
Hey, for a moment there, I thought we were in trouble.
In story 1, with everyone feeling bummed out after not Andy's argument, Miles comes down to liven everyone up. As Miles dances, Duke announces,
The views on my channel are off the charts. You gotta see this. Change things, right? Maybe we can talk alpha news.
You bet your ass. Come here.
Miles makes a drink and calls for a toast. But then... Blanc asks for the police to be called, and everyone has a panic. But...
Boat can't come till low tide in the morning, 6 a.m. Miles's dumbass Banksy dock was set to low tide height is a piece of shit.
As Blanc tries to organise everyone, Miles notices Duke drank from his glass, and declares he was the intended target. Miles panics and acts like everyone is out to get him. Then Lionel notices Duke's gun is missing. Then Miles panics about the time.
My murder game. We were going to be having drinks, and I thought it'd be fun to say something dramatic just at 10 o'clock.
What happens at 10 o'clock?
Whilst this is going on, over in story 2, Helen is still searching the rooms, pausing only when her phone blows up with messages. Andy's death has just been announced. Only for Whiskey to turn up crying.
I left Duke because I couldn't. He didn't deserve this.
He is a bastard. I don't feel sorry for him. He deserved what he got.
Just as Whiskey pulls the spear gun on Helen, the lights go out and Helen makes a run for it. Bloody hell, Whiskey nearly murdered Helen. I kind of like this scene. It's one of the few moments in this film where I think the writing adds up. Considering the last thing Helen said to Whiskey, it's little wonder she decided this was what Whiskey was crying about. Plus, she doesn't know Duke is dead. Whiskey wanting to be alone to deal with her grief is a reasonable response, and her room would be an obvious choice for that. Even going off alone into the night isn't a bad choice on her part, because she wasn't around when Blanc declared Duke's death a murder. Whiskey deciding Helen must have murdered Duke, based on what she said, is a bit of a leap. Although that could be put down to a heightened emotional state, plus an unreasonable assertive mentality she might have picked up from Duke.
I love my boobs. They're so much fun. Oops. Sorry, feminist.
Sorry, feminist.
After the near miss with the spear gun, Whiskey runs back to the party and declares Andy killed Duke. Confused, panicked, fearing for their lives, everyone makes a run for it. Outside, Helen bumps into Blanc.
And why are the lights out
Duke is
everywhere?
dead.
What?
No time. Did you find the envelope?
No, I searched every room. It's not there.
As Blanc tells Helen to search the glass onion itself,
Mr. Blanc, is this safe? I'm scared.
This is your last chance to back out.
It was Blanc's plan to use Helen to bait the disruptors, and although Helen agreed and persevered, she still had doubts and fears. Blanc knowingly encouraged Helen to go to a secluded island with a murderer.
One person will know the truth about you, and they certainly wouldn't hesitate to kill again if it covers their tracks.
Now the gamble has backfired, and another innocent woman has been murdered. Or not? Wait, what? Oh, fuck off. This should have been a death. And it works both ways. If the film had been made properly, with all events in chronological order, then this death would have been a shocking surprise to the audience. As it is, it's an ominous destination that the audience is waiting to get to with dread. Helen dying would have taken its toll on Blanc, who would have, and should have, felt responsible for her, despite his saying to the contrary. It would have opened up questions about his morality, his responsibility, his judgment. But the film once again breaks its own emotional investment in the story and characters to subvert our expectations. Funny how that keeps happening. Bloody hell, film. In story 1, Helen is shot, and a few seconds later, everyone turns up to see what happened, leading Blanc to herd the lot of them back into the party room. In story 2, Helen survives thanks to bullshit, and after a conversation between her and Blanc, Helen pretends to be dead. Everyone turns up, Blanc herds them away, so Helen can go search the glass onion. Once again, the film rewrites history by extending the time between gunshot and everyone turning up from 20 seconds to 1 minute 30. That's 4.5 times as long. This wouldn't be so bad, but the film keeps doing it over and over. It's almost like it's doing it deliberately. And if you're wondering where all the blood came from...
That has a kick.
Oh, that's Jeremy Renner's small batch hot sauce. Take a few bottles.
Thank you.
You have. That's it. Oh, no, give me that. Give me that.
As Blanc demands the police be called, again, Helen goes up to the glass onion. Given the office is made of glass and mesh wire, it's no surprise the envelope would be hidden behind the photo frame or whatever this is, since it's the only place in the office that you can't see through, except the fax machine. But for some reason, the film makes a point of showing Helen noticing the red dot in the artwork as if, wait, why is there a hole in this thing? Is it purely for the reveal? While Helen is searching, Blanc is blathering on.
I keep returning to the glass onion. Something that seems densely layered, mysterious, and inscrutable. But in fact, the center is in plain sight.
It hides not behind complexity, but behind mind-numbing, obvious clarity. Truth is, it doesn't hide at all.
I was staring right at it.
Combining this diatribe with the visual of the artwork, photo of the old bar, and fake napkin, all I can think is, yes, this hole must be here purely for this reveal. In which case, bloody hell film. And this is ignoring another question. Why did Miles keep the envelope? Blanc assumed up to this point that one of the disruptors killed Andy, and they brought Miles the envelope with the napkin inside as proof of their handiwork. In the incredibly unlikely event that Miles never had an opportunity to get rid of the envelope after being given it, then perhaps this was the best place for it. Even without the hole in the artwork, Helen would eventually have checked and found it. But all of what I just said is about to be blown out of the water. Let's have a quick recap.
The views on my channel are off the charts.
That's your glass, Miles.
Where's Duke's phone?
Forget about his phone, look.
What happens at 10 o'clock?
Blanc calls Miles an idiot and evidences his opinion with all sorts of details that have popped up throughout the film.
Can we just take a second and fully abbreviate this moment? Place, it's the full reclamation of everything I've achieved up to now.
The pre-definite detective.
The infraction point. Bask in the sun, swim in the Ionian Sea.
That is the Aegean Sea. His dock doesn't float. His wonder fuel is a disaster. His grasp of disruption theory is remedial at best. He didn't design the puzzle boxes. He didn't write the mystery. Et voila! It all adds up. Look into the clear center of this glass onion. Miles Braun is an idiot.
For anyone who doesn't know, this is how you're supposed to criticize stuff. And the reason you do it like this is so people can see your workings and agree when you're right or point out when you're wrong. Like this. Using the wrong words can be evidence of ignorance or stupidity. But then there are plenty of intelligent people who have difficulty with the spoken word, sometimes for serious reasons, so this isn't as great a bit of evidence as the film thinks. Miles's grasp on disruption theory might not be worded or understood right, which is also a sign of ignorance or stupidity, but whether Miles and the disruptors could explain disruption theory or not, their practice of it is actually sound. Not designing the puzzle boxes or writing the murder mystery is in fact a sign of wisdom, i.e., knowing what you can't do and hiring someone who can. It's not referenced at all whether Miles designed the dock, or, like everything else, he paid someone else to design it. Either way, it not floating was what it was designed to do, potentially deliberately restricting access to Miles Braun's exclusive island. It only cocked up in this unforeseen emergency. But then helicopters are a thing, which this film seems to have forgotten. And despite the wonder fuel, as Blanc puts it, being called a disaster, it actually hasn't had the opportunity to be anything yet. The only thing it's done is power Miles's island, and it's doing just fine. So far. Like I said, we'll get to that. The evidence for Miles being stupid is a bit inconsistent, to say the least. I wonder if the film is going to keep that up. After listing Miles Braun's supposed failures, Blanc declares Miles killed Duke, offering as evidence the lie about the drink.
Duke took my glass.
What did we all actually see?
Duke saying Miles nearly ran over him near Andy's house.
You remember that night you almost pancaked me with it on the road outside of Andy's?
Anderson Cooper's birthday.
And Miles being in New York for Whiskey's birthday, which was around the same time.
Miles had been living in Greece the past 6 months.
Whiskey, Miles saw you on your birthday in New York. Gave you that necklace for your birthday. And you're a Taurus.
2 weeks ago.
Miles killed Duke because Duke saw a news post about Andy's death on his phone. Duke immediately made the connection between Andy's death and Miles being at her house, and tried to use this as leverage to get himself on Alpha News in exchange for not telling anyone.
The views on my channel are off the charts. You gotta see this. It changes things, right? Maybe we can talk Alpha News.
At least that's what we're told. Based on this film saying everyone is stupid and Duke acting pretty half-wittedly, I would have guessed he wanted to come on Alpha News to discuss Andy's death. If anything, based on his characterization, I'd half expect him to yell out, "Oh my god, Andy's dead," at the top of his lungs. Also, his go-to reaction is to blackmail Miles. Is he not the least bit curious about the supposedly dead Andy he just talked down to? Whatever the case, Miles decided Duke was too dangerous to live, so he killed him with pineapple juice.
Travel details to come. Please forward any dietary restrictions.
No pineapple in there, right? Duke don't dance with pineapple.
There's no pineapple.
Birdie, what are the ingredients to your Cuban breeze?
Vodka, amaretto, and pineapple juice.
And during the confusion, Miles took Duke's phone, so no one could see the news story on it and make any assumptions. Let's go through these details, shall we? The original pancake line, as presented in the film, is very isolated and can easily be missed. Thanks to the story reset, it can also easily not be connected with the other pancake line.
You remember that night you almost pancaked me with it on the road outside of Andy?
Anderson Cooper's birthday.
He almost got in an accident on his motorcycle. He was driving so fast.
Andy, I almost got pancaked.
The film loses points for separating these lines so much with the story reset. It loses even more when you realise they changed the audio between the original utterance and the latter remembrance.
You remember that night you almost pancaked me with it on the road outside of Andy?
Anderson Cooper's birthday.
You remember that night you almost pancaked me with it on the road outside of Andy?
Anderson Cooper's birthday.
Outside of Andy.
Anderson.
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 Doing it this way makes Blanc look more intelligent and observant than he actually is. It also makes the audience feel stupid because it makes them believe they missed something that wasn't there to be missed. From the bottom of my heart, fuck off, film. The whole tourist thing would have been good, especially since the film states when the film is taking place, and has the necessary references during Helen and Whiskey's chat in Story 2. And as much as I don't pay attention to star signs, others do, so it would be a clue for them to pick up. Except the location of anyone or anything is never brought up except here and now. The film created and solved a problem in one fell swoop before anyone even had a chance to think about it. Why Miles killed Duke is a thing I'll accept for now. The allergy thing is a nice setup with the line from the invitation and the utterance on the dock, and Miles does announce Birdie's drink when she gets it, so those in the know would, know. As a casual observer who doesn't know anything about the ingredients of that drink, or most drinks as it turns out, I would have liked some hint at what was to come. Now, the bit about whether Duke picked up the drink or not is a little bit cheeky in my opinion. It's not as bad as some of the other edits in the film, which I've already mentioned, but it's still not great. Personally, I would have had Miles say the lie and leave the visual for the reveal. My big problem with the drink comes afterwards.
That's your glass, Miles.
He picked up mine. I'll pay you $1 billion to tell me which one of them tried to kill me.
Miles!
Trying to trick people into thinking Duke took his glass by mistake is one thing. Saying someone potentially poisoned it is another, because Miles made his own drink in view of everyone. Someone should have questioned him on that, like Blanc, for instance, which would have led to a lot more questions. In fact, it was incredibly, insanely stupid of him to do that because of Duke's phone. When Miles accuses someone of poisoning his drink, the phone is in his pocket. To the film's credit, if you go back and watch that scene again, you can actually see the phone in his pocket. You can even see between shot changes the phone disappear off the table in front of him. That said, drawing attention to himself whilst he has the phone clearly visible in his pocket and everyone knows Miles doesn't have a phone is incredibly short-sighted, especially considering there are so many times he has his back to everyone. Not to the camera, mind you, the audience always seems to have the worst view of it. I'm sure there will be arguments that yes, Miles is that stupid to draw attention to himself at the worst times, but fortunately everyone else is stupid too, so he gets away with it. But what about Blanc? Blanc doesn't bring up the fact Miles handed his drink to Duke, even though he appears to be the only one who remembers him doing so. Blanc doesn't pick up on the fact Miles made his own drink, and therefore doesn't question the poisoning idea, even though Blanc was looking right at Miles when he made it. Blanc doesn't notice the phone in Miles's back pocket, even when he's looking right at him and the phone whilst looking for the phone. Is Blanc meant to be blind and stupid as well? And we haven't even got to the gun yet. As Blanc accuses Miles of killing Duke, Helen appears with the envelope, allowing Blanc to accuse Miles of murdering Andy as well, using the envelope and faxed email as evidence.
One number, all his machines.
Andy. Andy used to tell me the truth.
The one thing that could destroy his empire of lies, the truth, in the hands of the only person unafraid to tell it.
This, combined with Duke's testimony, would have put Miles on the spot. Then Blanc accuses Miles of trying to kill Helen. Miles knew Helen wasn't Andy, but he also knew the Disruptors didn't know, and they all had motive to kill Andy, as Blanc had already worked out.
You have a house on a remote island filled with desperate people, all of whom have a real-life reason to wish this woman harm.
So Miles took the opportunity to take Duke's gun and hide it in the minibar, retrieving it when the lights went out, as he had previously planned to happen. In the dark, he skulked around until he found Helen and shot her, running off and leaving the gun where it was so he could appear with the rest of the Disruptors unarmed. Right, the more I think about this, the more issues I have. Initially, Miles finding and shooting Helen seemed feasible. It's his island, he knows it better than anyone else. All he needs to do is see where Helen is and use his knowledge of the layout to get to her. But that requires Helen to be found, and Helen could have been bloody anywhere. It was sheer dumb luck that he happened to find her.
Conveniently within reach. Andy?
Speaking of, let's talk about the gun. Again, credit where credit is due, you can go back and see when Miles took the gun from Duke's belt. And you can even catch a glimpse of the gun as he puts it in the minibar, which was a huge bloody risk, and he was very lucky no one saw the gun in there. Imagine if Birdie or someone decided they needed a drink to get over the death of Duke and walked over to the bar. Then there's the actual taking of the gun. Pretty sure Duke would have felt that, unless we assume he's just that drunk. I'm not so sure the same could be said for Birdie's eyesight. She's looking at Miles, and Duke is in fact walking towards them as Miles takes the gun. But alright, let's say Birdie didn't see it for whatever reason. How did Peg miss it? She's looking right at them, and she's on the side that Miles held the gun. This whole film, people have been ignoring Peg. Right here, the film itself ignores Peg. Bloody hell, film. So after Blanc has accused Miles of killing 2 people and attempting to kill a third, Lionel asks a very important question.
You still kept the envelope. You didn't burn it or anything?
Sod me sideways with a spatula. That is a very important question. Not to put too much importance on it, but the envelope, more specifically the napkin inside, is the only hard evidence connecting Miles to Andy's death. As I said before, previously it was assumed one of the Disruptors brought it to the island to show Miles what they had done. But now, with Miles as the murderer, the napkin is no longer needed. In fact, it is as not needed as anything has ever been not needed. So why did Miles keep it? Miles, Blanc, nor the film as a whole give us a definite answer. Because of this, people have tried to come up with their own reasonings. An answer I received to this question is, he's stupid. The problem is, the evidence in the film doesn't back that up. Miles was clever enough to plan a fairly convincing fake suicide. He was smart enough not to leave any evidence behind. It was unfortunate he got seen by Duke, but that was a problem he managed to sort out quickly and efficiently. He even pre-planned one murder while carrying out another. And it was only luck and bullshit that one failed. Add to this the things he did for the disruptors to make them successful, the building up of Alpha Industries apparently in spite of Andy, and his getting a brand new Wonder Fuel to work in his home. The problems I have with what he does, stealing the gun, the poison accusation, drawing attention to himself with the phone, these things are possible according to the film, so if these are confirmed as stupid, then the film itself is confirmed broken. Another suggestion is that Miles never has any good ideas of his own. It's pointed out twice in story 1 and 2 that he comes up with bad ideas.
The man faxes me in the middle of the night. He sends me his ideas. Uber for biospheres. AI and dogs equals discourse. His first venture was movie phone for foot massages.
And yet, he's a billionaire businessman. The film attributes this to other people. The disruptors wanted to do things, so Miles helped make them happen. Andy wrote down her ideas for Alpha, and Miles worked off of them. And everything on the island has been made by someone else.
That's the hourly dong. You know I got Phil Glass to compose that. My puzzle guy barely got the 5 done in time, and he apprenticed with Ricky Jay. I hired Gillian Flynn to write the whole thing.
Oh, she's quite good.
She's goddamn expensive.
Miles meets some sketchy Norwegian scientist who sells him on this whole new hydrogen fuel.
Even Andy's murder was inspired by Blanc.
It's like putting a loaded gun on the table and turning off the lights. And you stole the whole idea from me.
You might be thinking to yourself that this concept has holes in it, and you're right, it does. The film evidences Miles not having his own ideas, but then shows he does, including ones that work. Regards the former, Miles realizing the ideas of others isn't stupid, it's problem solving. Regards the latter, Miles getting other people to make stuff for him is a sign of wisdom, as I've already mentioned. But the film says he's stupid for doing both, so again, the film contradicts itself. Which leads us nicely back to the envelope and the napkin therein. Miles is clever enough to find the envelope in Andy's house. He's stupid enough to hold on to the envelope and not dispose of it. He's not stupid enough to lose it on the way from Andy's house in America to his private island in Greece. And he's not clever enough to simply chuck the bloody thing into the sea. But none of that matters, because the film creates a singularity to sort all that out. The collective stupidity of all the characters coalesces into one action, and the terrible editing facilitates it. Helen holds the napkin out accusingly to Miles. Miles holds up a lighter and burns it. Helen doesn't see Miles move his arm towards the napkin, nor does she hear the lighter go on. Apparently, just like with the gun and Duke's phone, Helen and the rest of the characters in the film can only see what the audience can. In a film filled with bullshit moments, this has got to be one of the bullshittiest. I did say one of, okay? And the film says he waited all this time to do this because he didn't think of doing it until...
You still kept the envelope. You didn't burn it or anything?
Bloody hell, film. So, because Helen is as intelligent as her sister, there is now no evidence of Miles having killed Andy. With this revelation, Blanc throws in the towel and says he can't do anything. Wait, hang on. What about Duke? Yes, there is no evidence Miles killed Andy anymore, and the shooting of Helen can't be pinned to him, but Duke's death can. The setup the film provides on its own should be enough to convict Miles, not to mention everyone seeing Miles hand his drink to Duke, including Blanc. But Blanc has completely forgotten about Duke, and so too has the film apparently. Seriously, no one brings him up again. Potentially his body was left in the building to be cremated when it burnt down. Oh, wait, hang on, I'm getting ahead of myself. Buckle up, Mother Hubbards. So Blanc says,
There's nothing I can do, except maybe offer you some courage and a reminder of why your sister walked away in the first place.
remember this? That's all the audience of this film got, and that's what's being referenced here. Why does he still have this? Cue Helen going berserk mode, smashing all the glass ornaments, eventually being joined by the remaining disruptors. Seriously, Duke is right over there. And even Miles.
Hey! Mazel tov!
A quick note here, completely inconsequential, but Helen picks up this flanged mace from the glass knight to smash up this piano. She then wrecks the minibar with a pedestal. What happened to the mace? Anyway, Miles, who is quite happy to let them break things, draws the line when Helen starts setting fires, for obvious reasons. Again, Duke is right there, you just ran past him, you careless. Then Helen holds up the lump of clear, and we have this quick montage of stuff around the room, including the fax machine.
The heating and the cooling, everything, right down to my fax machine. The whole glass onion is powered by clear.
Helen lobs the lump of clear at the fire, and what the bloody hell is going on here? No, seriously, what is going on here? If clear was being used like natural gas, then this whole place should have been vaporized. But it's not, which means clear is safer than gas? Then again, clear is being used to power electrical devices, which means it's being used in a generator and not piped in, so this wouldn't work anyway. Then again, the fire went up the vent, which should, vent the fire out of the building, not... What is it they think it did? Nothing about this makes any sense. But it's about to get so much worse. So earlier I mentioned the Mona Lisa is in this room. During that scene, Miles demonstrated how to bring down the protective shield around the painting.
I had a little override button installed. But I needed to be able to look her in the eyes without glass in between us.
Throughout the film, the shield kept being activated by lighters, people shouting, putting glasses down, phones going off, you name it. Which was pretty stupid because that meant someone had to keep lowering the shield every time, which no one was, which meant it was going down on its own. Anyway, after the building blows up, sort of not really, for some reason known only to Yogg-Sothoth and the Outer Gods, a bunch of flamethrowers are pointed at the Mona Lisa. Helen, seeing this, runs over to the override switch and drops the shield, burning the Mona Lisa to ash, which is where we get this delightful clip from. And let me just repeat that. Helen burned the Mona Lisa to ash. I don't care why. There is no good reason why. You are scum. Fuck you. Outside the now burning building, Miles has a go at Helen.
You baby! I hope your little bitch tantrum gave you closure, cause it accomplished nothing!
Helen, who, let's just remind ourselves, burnt the Mona Lisa to ash, says this.
Your feel of the future just barbecued the world's most famous painting. You're ruined. And you did get your wish to forever be remembered in the same breath as the Mona Lisa.
As she walks off, Miles tries to get the disruptors on his side. Just before Helen turned evil, she asked the disruptors to lie for her to get Miles arrested for murder.
Nobody stepping up? Raise your hand and say, I saw him take Duke's gun. I saw him that night at Andy's house. I saw the napkin before he burned it. You would lie for a lie, but you won't lie for the truth.
Duke. Duke is right over there. Get him for Duke. But they wouldn't because of their investment in Miles, his financial prowess, and the fact he could get them in all sorts of trouble for all sorts of reasons. But they realise, with Miles ruined, none of that is a thing anymore, so they all agree to lie to get him arrested. So much for two wrongs don't make a right. The last shot of the film is of Helen sitting next to Blanc, watching the police arrive. And the film would like you to believe she's won. When Helen stood up to Miles on the steps, Miles could have said a lot back. But the writer decided to keep his mouth shut, because reasons. Don't worry, we can speak for him. At the start of the film, Helen said this about taking evidence of potential murder to the police.
Somebody like me takes something like this about a group of rich folk with an army full of lawyers.
Now, Helen isn't facing the disruptors, but Miles Brong himself, the man with all the money and all the lawyers. There is no evidence left that he did anything wrong. Even the one thing they could have got Miles on, the death of Duke, has gone up in flames, literally thanks to Helen. The police will arrive on the island and find a woman who looks suspiciously like Andy Brand, who is dead. Miles can quite easily, with the help of police reports, accuse Helen of pretending to be Andy to get on the island and blow it up, which she did. Miles could probably even swing it that Helen killed her sister for some twisted reason or another. Blanc's anecdotal evidence will be ignored because he's in league with Helen. The best Helen can hope for is the disruptors sticking to their made-up stories. But the film has already testified to their collective stupidity, so they will almost certainly fail at that. Plus, if they confess to having lied in court, or are found to have lied, then they probably won't be believed anyway, or made out not to be believable by Miles's lawyers. Hell, once they realise Miles is still in a pretty good position, the disruptors will probably about face and back him up again. The destruction of the Mona Lisa will fuel Miles's hatred and campaign against Helen, who will take the blame for its ruination. Even Claire will probably get its chance in the sun, as this was a clear example of sabotage. Simply put, Helen is buggered and is going to prison for a long, long time. The end. Bloody hell, film. I have to give credit to the film Glass Onion. It made people think about their insults. As someone who has looked into terrible reviews, it's surprising how often people will begin and end their criticism of a film with the words,
It's so dumb.
Glass Onion, like some other recent media offerings, She-Hulk and Velma come to mind, preemptively included a response to critics. One of Glass Onion's themes is, meant to be, all about how things look clever but are actually base.
Look into the clear center of this glass onion. Miles Braun is an idiot.
This theme is inspired by the idea of subverting the expectations one would have for a murder mystery story. Fans of the genre would go in expecting a complicated, interwoven narrative that would test a viewer's attention to detail and puzzle-solving abilities. Only for Glass Onion to subvert this expectation by revealing a murder that is simple and straightforward. So whenever someone points to the film and says it's stupid, its defenders will reply that it's meant to be, and that anyone calling it stupid has fallen into its devious trap. The thing is, just because something recognises how dumb it is, doesn't suddenly make it not dumb. And just because something was meant to be dumb, doesn't suddenly make being dumb good. Unfortunately for everyone involved, this theme of stupidity walks hand in hand with the theme of disruption. In the film, this is embodied by Miles and co, who are basically posers, and Helen, who is willing to go all the way and do the unthinkable. In the meta, Glass Onion is meant to disrupt the murder mystery genre by introducing new and innovative stories. And it does sort of do that. The problem is, the story it introduces is shit. Glass Onion is a murder mystery film that doesn't know how to be a murder mystery film. Watching it makes me think someone heard what murder mysteries do and tried to copy it from word of mouth alone. A good murder mystery has a character in the story obfuscate information from other characters. A bad murder mystery has the story obfuscate information from the audience. Glass Onion does the latter, from re-editing scenes to inserting new perspectives to restarting the whole bloody story. It basically challenges the audience to complete a puzzle, only to keep half the pieces to itself. That's why there's so many instances of the film trying to hide information from the audience in increasingly insulting ways. Changing what people say, changing what people react to, changing who is in a scene, changing what information people have, hiding what information people have, hiding things from the camera despite them being in plain sight of characters, hiding stretches of time with editing, hiding half the bloody story that the audience should have been aware of to reveal it later in a muddled order. As much as people declare the film isn't clever, which is definitely the case, it's clear from these examples it's very much trying to be. The red herrings are another example.
Not here.
Who's that?
That's Daryl. He's not part of the experience at all.
This bloke pops up a few more times in the film, and that's it. He just pops up every now and then.
Ignore me. This is the full reclamation of every...
It's classic. Hey, not here.
You know, every time...
Hey,
Hi.
wanna hang out or?
Sorry.
Disruption. Fucking A.
Peg is another example. She's Birdie's +1 and is generally overlooked and underappreciated by everyone, whilst stressing herself out trying to stop Birdie ruining both their lives. She even goes as far as to beg Miles not to make Birdie take the fall for her clothing line's sweatshops.
I'm sorry.
It's Peg.
In another murder mystery, Peg would absolutely be a prime candidate for murderer. But Glass Onion uses her as nothing more than a red herring, completely mishandling Peg's potential. But then, Glass Onion is an Olympic-level mishandler, especially when it comes to emotionally invested payoffs. Blanc mentioning the anonymous invitation, Helen ranting at the Disruptors and describing them as backstabbers, the Disruptors arguing with Not Andy after dinner, and Helen being shot. Each of these instances was undermined, hamstrung, or completely knocked silly by the film trying to trick its audience with thematic subversions and misinformation. This focus on subversion and obfuscation ironically blinds the writer to the many cock-ups and inconsistencies they add to their story. Saying the police found Andy's car running ignores the fact the Disruptors turned up at Andy's house and would have heard it or seen the fumes. Helen saying she checked Andy's email, which the police should have done themselves and investigated. Claire saying all the Disruptors called Andy's phone multiple times, which Helen should have checked, as well as the police. Having the wristbands, which exist purely as a clue for the murder mystery game, act as room keys is a problem when Helen doesn't use them to get into the rooms later. Having a wristband ready for Blanc despite his not being on the guest list. Claire's volatility being a problem despite all fuels having that problem. Blanc and Helen ducking out of shot to avoid being seen by Duke despite there not being anywhere to hide. And a big one I forgot to mention earlier, Claire, Lionel and Peg not looking at their phones during the party when everyone is bored and miserable, which would have made everyone aware of Andy's death, drastically changing events. This also goes for information that is hinted at, but never explained. The spray Ethan Hawke uses. How the Disruptors met. Mentioning the Disruptors' old jobs, but not Miles or Andy's? And what exactly Alpha was, or is. Possibly the biggest small detail that is mishandled is the fax machine. It's an oddity, a piece of archaic technology that shouldn't exist anymore, and yet somehow turns up in Glass Onion being used by a tech giant billionaire. Why? Miles needs to use a fax machine, and only a fax machine, so he can't be included in Andy's email list, and can't see the news of her death before Duke does. That way, he won't be suspected of Andy's death, and it means his having Duke's phone will be noticed, eventually. But having the fax machine as the sole point of contact for Miles Bron, head of Alpha Industries, the biggest tech company in the world, also causes massive security risks that no company would allow. Not only would Alpha Industries have folded multiple times due to constant corporate espionage, but Miles would have been forced to use more secure technology. But no, he has a fax machine because it's convenient for the plot, and blimey heck does Glass Onion love its conveniences. It's convenient Helen brought her smashed box to Blanc's apartment so his mate can shout,
Blanc, there's someone here for you. With a box.
Convenient the police don't investigate Andy's death as suspicious. Convenient Helen is Andy's twin. Convenient Andy kept diaries all her life. Convenient no one knows Andy is dead. Convenient the Disruptors don't know or don't remember Helen exists. Convenient Miles made a puzzle box invitation for Andy despite them not being on good terms anymore. Convenient invitations don't need to be shown at the dock to go to the island. Convenient Blanc isn't told to leave by Miles. Convenient the wristbands aren't needed to open the guest rooms. Again. Convenient Miles doesn't ask to see everyone's invitation to see who invited Blanc. Convenient Duke doesn't question why Miles cut him off or try to correct what Miles said. Convenient Miles uses a fax machine, taking him off the suspect list. Convenient Miles uses a fax machine so it's obvious when he takes Duke's phone. Convenient that every disruptor has an issue that can be interpreted as a motive to threaten or protect Miles. Convenient none of them, or Miles, ever catch Helen out in a conversation and reveal she isn't Andy. Convenient Miles doesn't think to get rid of the envelope. Convenient that this book is somehow bulletproof. And convenient everyone forgets about Duke's death, so Miles can get away with it. I really can't get over that, by the way. He died in front of them, and minutes later they don't seem to care anymore, even when they're standing in the same room as his corpse. Bloody hell, no one mentions having to tell his mother about his death. Not even Whiskey. It's like he ceased to exist, except in reference to Andy. And therein lies the reason. Like so many other instances, the death of Duke could have had some significant emotional weight to it that would have hung around for the rest of the film. But he died not because of his importance, but because of Andy's importance. Therefore, as far as the story is concerned, his death is only important in relation to her. Themes and subversions above all else. Which reminds me, I pointed out earlier how Miles isn't holding the gun in his left hand in this scene. But that's fine, because he's holding it in his right hand the rest of the time, right? Yes, except here. Why is that? He's not using it, he's not putting it somewhere, and there's no characters present to hide it from. The only people who can see him right now is the audience. That's when you realise Miles, or more correctly Edward Norton, is hiding the gun from the camera, and once you realise that, you realise the problem with Glass Onion. Hello, me from the future here. Watching the video back, I realised I deleted a whole section of my script and didn't replace it with anything. Bad me, hit with stick. I was going to go over the characters of Glass Onion, what they bring to the table, how stupid ones look clever and clever ones look stupid. And I was going to reference this scene again and talk about how, with hindsight, Miles could be reinterpreted as mourning the death of Andy. But then it occurred to me, I don't know if Miles knew Andy was dead yet. Because of the way Glass Onion presents the story, his reactions are often multi-layered, like at the beach when he's shocked to see Andy. Is he shocked to see her accept the invitation? Shocked to see her alive? Shocked to see Helen pretending to be Andy? Based on his reaction to her reveal later, even his knowledge of Helen is in question. Simply put, the reasons for half of Miles' actions or reactions aren't made clear, even after multiple rewatches. Heavily interpretable, but not clear. This goes for most of the other characters as well. This could be down to a bad writer being incapable of being consistent, or the focus of the film being on trickery and sneakiness rather than telling a good story. Either way, or let's face it both, I decided there wasn't a point in examining the characters because they aren't really characters. They are vaguely veiled vessels for the writer's opinions, or blunt tools making the clunky script move. If the writer ain't going to care about them, why should I? Right then, past me, take this bitch home. Re-edits, obfuscations, and red herrings, causing inconsistencies, conveniences, unanswered questions, wasted investments, and straightforward, uncomplicated cock-ups. All for the sake of presenting meaningless themes and tricking the audience with unimpressive subversions. All at the expense of a good story, leaving us, despite it claiming the opposite, with a convoluted, amateurish mess of a film. What better way to describe Glass Onion? Can you tell I didn't like it?
Look at this pool. I think I'll go for a swim. Maybe I'll lay out for a bit.
But its gas form into household piping, massive leakage into the air. The hydrogen particles are too small.
The whole Glass Onion is powered by Clear. You know, it turns out the transport and the security was most of the cost. Check this out.